Hi. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me on a Friday afternoon, a little bit late. Hopefully I won't take up too much of your guys' time and you can enjoy the rest of the evening and go out and either make some games or think about making some games. And today I was going to talk about a talk that's been on my mind a lot lately called Are We Casual Enough Yet? And we'll talk about what are casual games, and if you are making games, are you making them casual enough for them to be successful? So you already heard, an introduction about myself, but just again, my name is Jesse Freeman, and I'm a technology evangelist at Microsoft, and my focus is on Windows 8 gaming. And you can email me at jesse.freeman@Microsoft. And my job really is to help people make really great games and make sure that those games are getting over to Windows 8. So I'm happy to help people out, and I'm based out of New York. So if anyone's local in New York, feel free to get in touch with me, and happy to help you make some games. And you can also find me on Twitter, just Jesse Freeman. So we'll dig in. We'll see how this works with a little bit of the delay going from slide to slide. Usually when I do this in person, there's a lot smoother transitions. But, to start this off, at some point, we went from making games that looked something like this, very epic, very large scale, required lots of people, lots of resources, and were just monumental games. And then lately we started turning to more games that look something like this. Mass-produced, just very simple, what you see is what you get. Build one, follow a template, move to the next. And I chose these slides. I actually have a background in art. I'm a self-taught programmer, and I got my degree in studio art and a master's in computer art. And doing a lot of art history, we can learn a lot from what happened with the evolution of art. It went from this ornate thing that people spent a lot of time, there was a lot of craft to kind of when you get into modern art, where there's a lot of artists who were either making fun of the establishment or actually trying to make a message, or were just trying to become more prolific. And people like Andy Warhol who are hiring people to do their art for them. And in this case, we're seeing a lot of developers who are just trying to get quick games out that people can understand, don't take a lot of thought, a lot of time out of their hands, and then move on to the next one. And it's okay because historically, people really like repetition. If you kind of look at the games that are really popular in the top 10, or 100 list, you're going to see a lot of very similar themes going on. A lot of games that do the same kind of mechanic, but just their skin's slightly different a little bit. And I make fun of Angry Birds a lot. Angry Birds is the poster child for a successful mobile game, but, there's a very simple formula to it, and it doesn't really change much from game to game. So, after just kind of making fun of, a very popular casual game, let's take a look at what really is a casual game. So the first part of being a casual game usually involves having mass appeal. And this means that the game transcends genres and can appeal to a very broad audience. So, most games are categorized as you have RPGs, and you have action, and you have fighting. And casual games don't really fall into any of those. They take elements from each one of these categories and just kind of sit on top of all of them. So that allows them to not be very niche games and have the most broad appeal possible to as many people who like those particular elements from games. The next thing is that these games always have a very simple game mechanic to them. They're not very hard to figure out. Most of the very, very successful casual games usually require just one finger and one simple motion. If you talk about Angry Birds, you only are using one finger, you're pulling back the slingshot, and you're letting go. And everything else is kind of just intuitive. As humans, we like to build things and destroy them. So seeing stacked objects and seeing how throwing something else into it breaks them is kind of part of our nature. And all we have to do is understand this one mechanic to how to feed into that, that natural cycle that we understand. They also have a very clear reward and motivation system. So, since these games are very simple, it used to be games were incredibly challenging and required lots of skill and replay and were incredibly frustrating. I'm thinking of, lots of levels from Mega Man 2, for example. and they had timing and patterns, and a lot of it was muscle memory. These games don't have that kind of difficulty level. So because they're so casual, they usually rely on something of, something that we all kind of remember. If you think back to kindergarten, whenever you did something good, you kind of got a sticker. And this reward system works really well because as humans, we really like to please and, be rewarded for pleasing others and showing that we do something well. And it doesn't matter what the reward is, it's just that act of being rewarded. So, instead of getting a sticker, in this case, usually they give you some sort of award in the game, or they give you some sort of currency or something, but that reward system is enough to keep motivating you to keep coming back and doing it over and over again to repeat that happy feeling you get when you feel like you succeed and you've been rewarded for succeeding. And because of that reward system, these games offer an incredible replay value. So traditionally, games had a story and an arc, and as you followed through the story, there was very little to go back and replay. I mean, multiplayer was kind of the solution for a lot of these games, where at least it always had this something to offer. But what's interesting about these casual games is that the replay value doesn't really come from multiplayer or from wanting to see the story again. It all comes from that reward cycle that you want to accomplish something. It rates you usually on how well you did it, and if you didn't do it well enough and you're an OCD type of person like me who has to do 100% all the time and try to complete things, you're going to go back and you're going to keep replaying it until it's perfect. Or if you're doing bad, the game is so quick and so rapid with the success-failure rate that if you fail, you can quickly restart the game and try over again. So those two things between the reward system and the replay value really feed off of each other well. And then finally, when you take all these things together and you add them up, what it really does is it lowers the barrier of entry for people who are playing games. And that's really the key, because as much as we want to make games that are really complex and model the real world and do all these great things, the problem is that those games don't appeal to everyone. And in order for the game to be truly casual, it needs to have the lowest barrier of entry so that anyone can just pick it up and start playing it. So, how did this happen? Because we've been making games for 40, 50 years now. Actually some of the first things that were ever built on computers were games. And really what's happened in the last few years is this is what's happened. All these new devices. And these devices are, one, readily available, they're incredibly accessible, they're very cheap, and most people have at this point a smartphone, some sort of tablet, some sort of even e-readers to some extent, although they're not really gaming mechanism, but still they're still training people that these are the kind of devices and this is the evolution of where computers are going. Because before all these devices, you actually needed dedicated hardware to play a game. Computers back in the day, in the 80s and even to the early 90s, weren't fast enough to play games. So you had game consoles, which were dedicated hardware. And then before the game consoles, you had arcade machines, which were even more dedicated and location specific. And because having a game system was it was a privilege, it wasn't as easily accessible as having a phone is today, this big stigma kind of arose around what a gamer was. And, this is kind of like the quintessential gamer who's playing World of Warcraft and has the dedicated World of Warcraft keyboard and mouse and a gaming computer. And, that is shifting. So over the last few years, we've seen that dramatically shift. And that's because the consumers of games are changing as well. And this is what the consumers of games look like now. This is my son I think he was 6 months old, maybe not even, and he immediately was able to pick up an iPad and start playing it. Granted, he wasn't good, but it was, as a kid, he's growing up. So when I grew up, I had games, or I think I got a Nintendo when I was 5 years old. He's having it since before he can even speak. And that's doing, very interesting things to the gaming landscape, because this is the audience that is growing up and looking for the most casual games, or are trying to play games that are simple enough for a kid, but yet are still entertaining for an adult. And it's a very hard balance. And it may make you kind of freak out because, if you're someone like me whose whole life you're like, I just want to make games, and I want to make these really great games. I don't want to make casual games. What I've just started to learn is that you have to just keep calm and keep making games. Because for me, the most rewarding part is actually making a game. If I have to dumb it down a little bit, or if I have to change the mechanics of it so that it's more appealing to people, because at the end, making games is a business. As much as I do it as a hobby and people do it as hobbies, if you want to be successful at it or you want to get recognized for it, you have to actually treat it like a business. So like any type of business, we need to really go back through and look at games and see what is successful and try to figure out what is the formula, because, a lot of this is just trying to pick up what the formula is that's successful, emulate it, and then, build upon it. So, which is a very different formula than just taking something, copying it, and just reskinning it and putting it out there. So I've selected a bunch of games that are all very popular and top games on Windows 8. And of course, these games are also very popular on iOS and Android. And we'll go through each of the slides. Usually I play a sample of the game, but over the streaming, it's not going to look very well. So hopefully you guys have seen a lot of these games. And I've already kind of made fun of Angry Birds a little bit. So I'll start with another game that I don't really know what kind of category to give this. It's just a new, modern type of game, and it's Where's My Water? And hopefully people played it. It's actually a really, entertaining game for what it's worth. And, the first thing you'll notice about this game, especially, with Angry Birds, is there's a very cartoony style. It's very approachable. It's very friendly. And it's the opposite of what you'd see on console games, which are heavy, realistic-looking 3D graphics. This is just very approachable, especially for a kid. And as you play the game, before you get into anything, there's a cute little intro animation that kind of sets up the very loose story around this game. In this case, it's the alligator is trying to take a shower, and all the pipes are broken, and you have to get the water into the pipe so that he can take a shower. And this actually uses a very simple technique. I call it the comic book animation. And they don't even do proper animation. What they do is they have a picture of the scene, and they just simply slide it in and out of view and pan it up and down. And it's also, a really great technique because, one, it cuts down on the amount of work and animation you have to do in your own game. And two, it's very approachable. And people, don't really care if there's full-blown animation. You might spend so much time in your game laboring over a particular detail that might actually be kind of irrelevant for most of the people who are playing. So some things to keep in mind, especially when you're cutting corners around these kind of intro animations. And then as soon as you're into the game, before you can do anything, you're presented with this big, obtrusive instruction on what to do. And in this case, you have to drag to cut the dirt. So you simply, and this is kind of animated, showing you literally what you have to do. And you just simply run your finger from the top where the water is down to the pipe, and you win the first level. There's no challenge to it. It's not teaching you anything outside of showing you exactly what you need to do and holding your hand. And then after that, it's, the same concept over and over again. They just add different obstacles into the game. Once you complete the level, you're presented with this score screen that tallies up exactly how well you did. And we get back to this whole sticker notion, right? You see that there's 3 ducks. I don't know how you could do it on the first level, but I guess theoretically it's possible to only get 1 duck. But you see right away that they try to give you, here, you've done the best that you can do for this level. You get 3 ducks, and here's your score. And the score almost doesn't even matter anymore, because as you continue to play and you get more ducks, you're really rated on that level. It used to be you played and you tried to beat the high score for a level. In this case, you're just trying to get, the full amount of stickers, or ducks in this case, that you can for this level. And then after that, you're presented with a screen that really, in my opinion, takes away all the fun of what growing up in the 80s and playing Nintendo games or Sega games was all about, which was you usually had to progress through the game. In this case, you have a level selector. And you'll see, again, this level selector, 1, shows you the entire game. So there's no ambiguity about how much longer am I going to be playing this game for? You know that there are X number of levels, and that these levels are locked. And the better I do, the more levels I'll unlock. And there's always this reminder that you see the first level has 3 ducks, the second level has no ducks, and now I want to get 3 ducks for that level. And it starts to establish this cycle of, I'm going to play the game, I'm going to keep playing it over and over again to perfect it. I want to collect all the rewards that are possible and unlock everything, and I know exactly what I'm in for. There's no surprises in this game. So this is kind of a game that I classify in like a new genre that only really kind of existed once touchscreen devices came around. So I'm a big fan of platformers, and platformers are slowly starting to make the transition over to mobile as well. And there's been a lot of problem with platformers because putting virtual controls on a touchscreen is just very difficult to play. So a lot of games are starting to steer away from that. So this is a really great game. This was on Xbox Live as well, and it's been ported over to Windows 8. And this game here, Gravity Guy, it gives you a lot of options for how you want to play. There is a story to it, but there's just as much emphasis on this notion of an endless mode and a practice mode. And from here, you pick what you want to do. So there's a little bit more depth than we're seeing with the other game. And as we go into it, immediately we're getting a cutscene. Again, it's the comic book style cutscene where it's just a still animation, a little bit of text, and that animation is just sliding an image back and forth, although it's split up into 3 panels, which really is very comic book reminiscent. And then once you get through the animation, you're thrown right into the game, and before you can do anything, you have to see, this big obtrusive instruction. So here, tap to flip gravity. And all the controls of this game have been boiled down to one notion, basically, which is you tap, and that tap doesn't even jump, it just flips the guy to the ceiling. And it's a new genre called endless runners. These games are very popular, especially on touch screens, because it's very easy to have one control, which is usually jump, or in this case, flip gravity. And the game kind of plays out like everything else you'd expect. You unlock levels, you go through. Again, there is a story, but the story isn't, the most compelling thing. The compelling thing is the challenge of making it through the particular level. So that's kind of an indie game that was made. Now, what happens when we take, I wouldn't say this is the grandfather of modern, maybe it's the grandfather of modern platformers. So, Nintendo and, created Mario, but when we started getting into the second and third, I guess the third generation of consoles, Rayman started really showing off what the platformer genre could actually achieve. And this game was always a strong emphasis on hand-drawn animations and just really solid controls and a lot of depth and a lot of content. So this winds up being one of my favorite games that's been ported over and, made casual for tablets. Because one, it's a gorgeous looking game, and two, surprisingly it works really, really well. And the one thing that made Rayman very difficult to do on a console, which is you need to have a physical controller, they've somehow figured out how to boil all that down into the essence of what the game is all about. So you have your start screen. When you go from your start screen, you're again presented with the level unlock. So Rayman, Legends, if you play it on the console, actually has a whole world, and you can kind of choose your own path. This just boils it down to each level is its own little thing, and then you can play it and try to unlock other levels. Same mechanic we're seeing in all these other games. And then as soon as you start the game, even though there's one button to this game, it literally tells you exactly what to do. And what's great about this game is this game has always been about collecting items. And it's kind of like a really good mix between Mario and Sonic, where I think, Mario was about collecting coins, but there's a lot more emphasis on just trying to navigate the level. Sonic was OCD about collecting coins. It was almost like Pac-Man on steroids, where all you did was collect coins. And then this kind of figures out the happy medium, but when it translates over to mobile, the whole thing now is just about collecting items. And it's an endless runner, and it does a really good job about if you jump and you bounce off of things, there's a lot of fluid motion with the game, so it doesn't feel like it's on rails like a lot of other endless runners that I've played. And then at the end, you're rated for how many things you've collected, and based on that rating, you either complete 100% or it compels you to go back, and then that also unlocks other levels. So here is a game that was traditionally a console game and a very well-known genre-defining console game that has been fully adapted to the casual market and winds up actually making the transition very well. And I could easily see that if Nintendo ever decides to make Mario for a tablet, they would go around the same route, that you'd wind up, Mario would easily become an endless runner with a lot of platform mechanics very similar to this. And, so this is, I guess this goes back to the PlayStation era. What if we go even further back? What happens when we take an arcade game and we bring that into the modern era? So this is the new Pac-Man game, Pac-Man XL. I should have written down the name of it. I always forget. But it's basically this championship version of Pac-Man. And they've redesigned the whole Pac-Man game around kind of touch-centric mobile devices. So there's just a course select, kind of similar to what we've seen before. And of course, before you get into the game, it's, this is Pac-Man, right? You just play endlessly. Well, not anymore. Now you have to unlock each of these levels. So the best time that you do helps you unlock the next level. So they're borrowing the same thing we've seen in the other games. Before you even play, it's Pac-Man. Like, I think we all know how to play Pac-Man at this point, but there's still controls on how to play Pac-Man. Except for this thing where it says use bomb, which is weird because this is a new thing that they've added. It's okay, there's a bomb. But I think we all kind of get what a bomb would do in a game, and games should, invite the player to explore and experiment. If you lose the first game or two, what's that going to hurt? But nope, they need to clearly call out in the next screen exactly what the bomb does in case you didn't want to experiment to find out. So here is all the controls for how to play the new Pac-Man. And then this is the Pac-Man game, and it's totally different. And it's different in a good way. I think this game actually works really well, and it's very time-based, and it's very techno-y, and it speeds up as you continue to play. And a lot of the same elements are there. There's just kind of been remixed. There's one thing, though, that I think is really interesting that they decided to add, and it's kind of telling about where we're going with game design for the casual market. If you're like me, when you play Pac-Man, you're always holding up or left or right in the next direction you want him to move. And it may be a little hard to see in this slide, but there's actually sparks flying off of Pac-Man because I'm actually holding up. And the game is telling me that I'm not allowed to move up. And it's a very subtle visual cue, but it's very telling of where the state of games right now is that you have to remind the player that, you're holding the wrong key, and it's almost like a punishment. It doesn't take any energy or anything off of Pac-Man, but, normally it's just the way that everyone's grown up playing Pac-Man, and this kind of, calls it out that you're sort of doing something wrong or that something is happening and you can't move up through a wall. So now that we've kind of seen all of these, examples, I'm going to switch over and talk about my own games and, oops, I still have the typo in this, my descent into casual game design. And with that in mind, I've been building games for a very, very long time. Most of them are pretty bad, but they're getting better. And it's only been recently that I've started trying to apply all these things that I'm seeing from casual games into my own games. So this game here is one I've talked about a lot, especially if you follow me on Twitter or my blog or seen some of these other talks. This game is called Super Paper Monster Smasher, and I really was I built this for Ludum Dare, which is a 48-hour game competition, and I really tried hard to make this game sort of casual. I wanted to make an RPG. The problem is it's very hard to make an RPG in 48 hours, so I had to boil it down to its essence, and I really used Diablo-esque stuff as my inspiration. But I also went to trying to I really love doing pixel art, so I tried to make cute-looking pixel art. And when you play the game, I put a lot of character in the game so that it's sort of entertaining just to watch. But the game is very basic. It has all the core elements of an RPG. You have different levels that you can level up. It has experience. You're the monster in this case, and you have bad guys to kill. And you also have life, and you have a rage meter. So the more you get hit, your rage meter fills up and you can kill everyone on the screen. But the controls are incredibly basic. So all you do is you hit left and right, and that moves you left and right. It's just a tap with a single finger, and he just kind of follows where you tap. So there's not a lot of complicated controls. And the way that the mechanic works for attacking is that if you're facing someone, you'll kill them or take off life from them, and if they're facing you and hit you from behind, you're going to lose life. So as you continue to get mobbed by all these heroes, the good guys that keep coming out on the screen, you start getting overwhelmed. You have to frantically go back and forth and try to attack them. But it's all done with a single finger. And then, like I was saying, the more you get hit, there's a combo system to bring your score up. So you try to chain up the kills. And then also there's a rage meter. So when the rage meter fills up, he jumps up, and then he falls. When he comes down to the ground, he kind of squishes everyone. And I put in a lot of different variety of bad guys in there to kind of keep the game engaging. And so as you level up, you basically fall through the floor and you move to another randomly generated level. And I built this for my son in mind, and now he's almost 4. And when he plays this game and he falls through the floor and the little rocks and stuff fall down, and he's able to run around and crush people, he's so happy. He almost screams. He's so excited when he falls to the floor. And so this is really geared towards an RPG that my kid can play, but that still is kind of appealing for adults and has a little bit of more grown-up humor to it. So then the next game that I started really working hard on was this game Super Jetroid. This is my Zelda, and I really tried very hard to make this game be casual, but it's a very hard game because you're a space explorer, and you're trying to balance your oxygen and your health and your energy, and there's a lot of really complex game mechanics to it. But there was one thing that I did to ease it up so that my son can still play the game. And making a game that kids can play as well as adults doesn't mean you have to dumb down the gameplay mechanic. One of the things that I did give into, though, is I did start adding in a level selector, and you're rated for how well you complete the level, so you have the star system, which unlocks another level. But what you'll see is at the bottom there's this difficulty setting. So there's a have fun mode and a serious mode. By default, it's set to serious mode. And when you're in serious mode, what happens is that you have your energy bars, you get damage, you have to collect things, and the game is very difficult in this mode. That being said, if you switch it over to have fun mode, all that stuff is actually stripped away, and you're presented with the same gameplay mechanics, but you're basically invincible. So here's what it looks like. You just don't have any of the health bars. And this allows me to play the game with my son because I can go in and unlock levels, and then my son can go in and play the same level, and he doesn't feel like he's having a different experience. All I've done is I've removed the most frustrating part for a kid, which is he wouldn't understand that he's being timed or that he has pressure. He's still trying to, learn how to play these games with a touchscreen. It's very hard to use a finger analog stick. But he's able to play the game, and he gets the same joy out of it as I would, but it's just simplified for him without changing the game in any way except for making it just invincible. And there's a lot of games that are starting to do this stuff, and I'm seeing them on Android where they have a light version or a kid version and a real version. But I highly suggest that if you want to make your games appealing to kids, build the kid version in, and I think you'll see some really good results because of it. So these were really good attempts, but they really weren't good enough. And I decided to go back and take a game that I spent a lot of time trying to work out, but was way too complicated and not casual enough. And well over a year ago, when I started writing the book for Impact, I created this game called Resident Raver, which is part of the demo that you build inside of the book. And this is kind of a built-out version of it. And I kind of modeled this after a game called Super Crate Box, which is really modeled after the original Super Mario Brothers in the arcade, where you played against another player and the monsters kept falling from the ceiling. In Super Crate Box, you wind up getting these crates appear and you can get weapons. So I kind of took the idea of Super Crate Box and I mixed it with Elevator Action, which was a really great game that I love playing in the arcade. And I came up with this. So here's kind of the level selector, which I was trying to get this notion of before I totally gave into the normal level selector that I showed in the other games with the star system. Here you just kind of ran over to where you wanted to go, and you unlocked each of the levels. And then this is the game. So basically the zombies just keep coming down from the ceiling, and you keep going into doors to get new weapons, and you have to keep fighting off the zombies. And it works well, but the problem is that it's really hard to play on mobile, and it's not appealing to a lot of people. So I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I was talking to a friend of mine, Elle from Booster Mobile, which does they do HTML5 game portals for mobile phones. And I was talking to her about this game that I started building. So I went back and I started rebuilding the game to Super Resident Raver. And I was showing her the game, and she had a lot of really good feedback. I actually wanted to put her email into the slide, but it doesn't read very well. So I kind of broke them out into different suggestions that she had when I went back and redid the game. So the first suggestion was that the game needs instructions and an intro, which kills me because I've been fighting for so long not to have that. But eventually I decided to give in. So this is what the game looks like now. I've actually boiled it down. There's no platforms or anything. All you do is move the player back and forth. You still have the doors. I got rid of the elevator. And when I started the game, I have this whole animation where the people run off the screen, and he picks up the backpack, which has a gun, and he shoots the zombies, and he runs in the door, and he goes to the next level. But it wasn't clear enough to people what you needed to do. So now, as soon as the people run off the screen, I freeze the game, I show a text box, and I tell them exactly what they need to do. In order to rescue people, you need to let them run off the screen. And even adding the people in, which was totally missing from the other game, there was no real value or reward for continuing to play. In this version of the game, you actually have to have a strategy around how to protect these people. So in order for you to move to the next level, you need to save X amount of people each level, and now you actually try to care about these people and make sure they make it off the screen correctly. And for humor, there's nothing better than I actually have the spawn points of the zombies a little bit off screen. So there is a moment where someone may run kind of off screen, and you feel like, oh, I just got them safe, but a zombie's right there, and they turn right around to run away and come right back on the screen. So if you're not being careful and you're not protecting them, you're not going to actually get the points that you need to, and very quickly you'll get overcome by the zombies. So the other thing that she suggested is that I need to have very, very simple controls. So for the original version of the game, I had a virtual D-pad, basically, and there was a jump button, there was a fire button, and there was a enter door button. And all that was just way too confusing. So I boiled it down to you can either use the arrow keys if you want to move left and right, and hit up if you want to get into the doors, or you can just click wherever you want to go. And this is a big technique I'm doing in all of my games right now, where I try to make it where it's just a single mouse click. So in order to move, you just simply click where you want him to move, and when you hit the door, he'll just go into the door when he gets there. So it's almost like a point-and-click adventure, or you can use your keyboard. And that works really great on mobile devices because I don't have to change the gameplay mechanic that much. I just simply adapt the mouse to it automatically switches over to touch. And since I'm only using one mouse point, I'm not dealing with multi-touch. I don't have to worry about that across different platforms. And then finally, he'll pick up a backpack, and it clearly tells you it's like pick up these backpacks, which people you save will throw back into the game. Pick that up, and then you can shoot by just hitting spacebar or pressing and holding. And I also went back. I mean, you'll see I spent a lot of time working with Inaki Diaz, who's my pixel artist, adding a lot more detail into the game so that it's just a lot more richer. And, it's not as casual looking as some of the other games I was trying to build, but it has a lot more visual appeal to it. So when the zombies explode, instead of them being big blobs of pixels, there's nice Mortal Kombat style body parts. Then this one kills me, but like I said, making games is a business. As much as you love doing it as a hobby, it's an expensive, time-consuming one, so you'd like to see some return on your investment of time. So she had suggested that I put ads in my game. So I went back and I tried to figure out some places that were unobtrusive for putting ads in. So here I have an ad placeholder for when you pause the game. So this way it's not in the way while you're playing. And then at the end of the game, I have another ad, or at least when you finish each level, it shows you another ad. And that's kind of important because you want to always be showing people, an ad and new ads each time so that you're getting a better inventory and you're getting more impressions and more opportunities for people to click. And also, I don't know who actually clicks on ads, but people do for some reason in games. If they do click on the ad, the game is paused in a safe spot so they don't feel like they're going to lose anything in the action. And I'm not tricking people to click the ad in the middle of the game by putting it somewhere that's strategically close to where you'd be clicking to actually play the game. And then the other thing that she suggested was leaderboards, which is something that I'm actually working on now. There's a really great API out there called Scoroid. I think it's Scoroid.net. And I'm going to start talking about that a lot more in my games. I'm starting to incorporate it into this game. But even just right now, even without that, I have this very basic notion of it ranks you at the end of the game. It shows you how many people you saved versus how many were killed, how many backpacks and zombies, and also your score versus the best score. And trying to keep a lot of stats in there so that people can clearly see what they're being ranked for. And the last thing is she told me, don't do pixel art. People are really sick of pixel art. And to that, I say never. I love my pixel art. I'm going to be doing pixel art as long as I can get away with it. Even my wife keeps telling me, like, when are you going to make games that are not in the 80s? But I really love pixel art style, and that's the one thing I won't compromise on. So that's kind of where I am right now. And I'll talk a little bit about using HTML5 games, using HTML5 for casual games. So last time I did a talk, I talked about using HTML5 during game jams. Some of this is going to be kind of the same material, but I feel like it's very important because there's a lot of really great things you can do with HTML5 that you can't necessarily do with other platforms. And, some of this now is that HTML5 is really kind of widely adopted now. Take that with a grain of salt, but the reality is that almost all the mobile devices out there to some extent can play HTML5 content. HTML5 web gaming is really big in Europe, and it's growing in the US as well. So mobile devices play it, modern browsers play it, and historically the people who are playing games tend to be on more of the cutting edge of technology. So there's a better chance that you're going to reach your audience through HTML5. And, the alternatives, of course, if you're especially going for web, is going to be some sort of plugin. And for me, it's key to be able to build a game that I can get to as many distribution channels as possible. Last night I did a podcast with the Lost Decade guys, and we had talked about their strategy about HTML5 distribution, and it's really the key to anyone who's trying to make a game is you want to get it on as many platforms as possible. And, right now we're kind of at the point where it is 100% cross-platform. You can publish your game to the web. You can package your game up with some native packagers. So Ludai has a solution called Cocoon.js. AppMobi, that was just recently purchased by Intel, will take your game and package it up and put that out there. So you can get to native platforms, you can run it in the browser, and you can run it in the browser on mobile platforms. And then, of course, on Windows 8, HTML5 games are first-class citizens. They're basically treated as native. So you don't have to do anything to wrap them up. You simply just put your code in and hit compile in Visual Studio, and you have an HTML5 game running. So you can maximize your distribution by leveraging how well HTML5 actually works on all these different platforms. And the final thing is that JavaScript really is a big bag of tricks. You can kind of do anything you want with JavaScript because it's so open. There's not a lot of ramp up. There's not a lot of structure to it. So if you're building casual games, the key is to build very quick games, and you want to build them fast, and you want to get them out there and move on to the next game and iterate. Think back to the Andy Warhol soup can photo. You want to have a huge collection of games that are very easy to make, don't take a lot of time, that have a little bit of value, and then you can move on to the next one. So JavaScript really allows you to do that because there's nothing really getting in your way. And then I wanted to talk about just some very popular HTML5 game frameworks if you're interested in that route. And the top one on my list right now, of course, is Impact, and it's not just because I wrote a book on it, but I played with all the open source game frameworks out there, and Impact, while it's closed source and costs $100, is completely solid. And what's great about it is that it also comes with its own level editor. You get all the source code, and you can go in and you can modify it. Like I've done a lot to modify Impact to run the way that I want it to, and that's something you can do with Unity. I think Unity is a great game platform for rapidly prototyping 3D games, but when it comes to 2D games, I kind of want to have a little bit of control, and especially with the state of HTML5 on mobile, there are some times where you need to go in and change the core of an engine to fit on a particular platform. So Impact is a really good one, and I highly suggest checking that out. If you're not into game frameworks per se, Create.js is a good solution as well, simply because it's a collection of different libraries. So there's a library for doing canvas, there's a library for doing sound, and all of those can be put together and you build the engine yourself. And the last one I want to talk about, which is the one that's really got my attention now and is probably what I'll be focusing a lot of my effort on the next few months, is a framework by a developer, Richard Davey, who goes by PhotonStorm on Twitter, and it's called Phaser. And Phaser is really interesting because it's actually a TypeScript framework. So TypeScript is a JavaScript compiler that's being developed by Microsoft and allows you to do strong typing in JavaScript, but it also outputs JavaScript that's human readable. And what's cool about Phaser is that you can use TypeScript if you want to have a lot more structure to your game, like have interfaces and classes and stuff you would get in other languages. Or you can just go straight to JavaScript and just quickly sketch out a game using just the JavaScript side. So it's still in development. It's up on GitHub. It's 100% open source. And on my website, I have a bunch of articles on how to get started, and I'm building out some starter kits and games for this to get people seeing how this actually works. And it's something that I highly suggest checking out. It's also based on Flixel, which was a really popular Flash game framework. And because of TypeScript, I think if you're a Flash developer who's looking to get into HTML5 gaming, you'll be able to take your skills from Flash and knowing AS3 and easily move over to TypeScript. And then Phaser will just help you because it'll be very similar to what you've seen in Flixel. So that's kind of the end of my talk. I usually wrap it up with a big plug for One Game a Month. So if you're not part of One Game a Month, become part of it. And this is such a great idea. It's basically you just build a game a month, and it doesn't have to be a good game. It's just about actually coming up with an idea, executing that idea, and submitting it. And of course, I would love to have you publish those games on Windows 8. There's such a great opportunity to be in at the ground floor of a new platform. But at the same time, I just want to see people actually making games and putting games up on One Game a Month's website. So, and this, in an ironic way, actually gamifies making a game. So you get rewarded and you get rewarded in scores, and there's a leaderboard and stuff like that. So definitely take part in One Game a Month. And, it's like anything. The more you build games, the better you get at them. So keep practicing and working on those games. The other thing is that I've been trying to open source a lot of my own games. So if you're interested in Super Jetroid and how it works, the code is not the cleanest. I keep meaning to go back and kind of document it and clean it up. But, help yourself to this starter kit. This will go to a blog post that I have on my website. The starter kit for Super Jetroid is open source. I have videos on how to get it up and running, how to publish it to Windows 8. It's a great opportunity. Actually, Microsoft is still offering, I think it's $100 per app that you submit. So this is a great opportunity. Here's a game engine for you. It has all the game mechanics from Super Jetroid. Go through, modify it, make it into something your own, get your feet wet with using Impact, and then publish it to the store. And, after 2 games, you'll make your money back on Impact and the developer license. But hopefully this is helpful, and I'll be doing a lot more starter kits for people to show them how they can easily make a game and get that game customized to what they want to do with it, and then publish it, because it's really all about publishing a game. And then for those of you who are in the New York area, whoops, that is actually the wrong slide, but I'll have to skip that slide. I'll talk about that anyways. If you're in the New York area, that slide was supposed to be for a promotion for, I do a game developer meetup every weekend at the Microsoft Office. So if you go to nygamemaker.com, you'll be able to see the schedule. You can also see it at my website. And come on out and learn how to make games. Every Saturday I'm teaching people from beginners to advanced. And then, of course, I'm happy to announce that I've been invited out to the Fluent Conference at the end of the month in San Francisco, and I will be doing a talk during the keynote about console quality cross-platform canvas games. And I'll be showing off Super Jetroid. I'll be showing off how it works on all these platforms, and I'll especially be showing off how cool it is to actually have an HTML5 game running on a Surface Pro with an Xbox controller. It's almost like your own game console wherever you go. So that's kind of coming up. And the last thing is I just wanted to thank everyone for watching. You can find out a lot more about what I'm up to at my website, jessefreeman.com, and I talk a lot about HTML5 and Windows 8 game development. And the slides for this are up, and I'll make sure that when I upload the slides that I actually fix that one slide with information about my weekend workshops. So outside of that, I'm happy to take anyone's questions.
Great webcast today, Jesse. Thank you so much. As always, you make learning about games fun, and we have a lot of good questions that have come in. We'll start with Dom's question. He'd like to know, is network multiplayer a viable approach for these casual games, or is that a different genre?
I haven't seen a lot of casual multiplayer games. I think that there's I don't know. I'm trying to think that I haven't seen a lot of really multiplayer games on mobile. I think the big thing about casual games is that they scratch this itch where you're waiting to do something. Like if you're in a city like I am, you wind up waiting between a subway ride, or you're taking a train somewhere and you just need a few minutes to play something. I think that there's a very big emphasis or de-emphasis now on multiplayer in games. It's definitely something that I want to play, but I think the other thing that I'm trying to get back into in my own games is local multiplayer. I think something's been lost by online multiplayer, but I mean, it'd be interesting to see. I don't know many casual games that the only thing I've seen them do is just really compete against other people with online leaderboards.
Thank you. And Earl would like to know if you could recommend some software development tools for HTML5 game developers.
So I'm assuming that's going to be about IDEs to use. So, of course, I'm going to say that Visual Studio is the best one if you're on a PC. Some other really great IDEs and stuff that I use for building my HTML5 games is I use Sublime Edit, which is a great, just simple text editor for people who don't like to deal with the whole IDE and code completion, all that stuff. And then the other alternative that's a good cross-platform one would be WebStorm by JetBrains. So those are like the three that I kind of bounce between.
Thank you. And Daniel would like to know if casual games are a good idea to engage kids with a cause like endangered animals.
I've seen a lot of educational games that have been made casual. It's a fine line between, telling a message and not losing that message in the game itself. But I think that that's increasingly becoming a tool that people are taking advantage of. I think with the whole gamification thing that was going on, people are looking to try to figure out how to gamify mundane things. But there's always been this movement for education to build games, and I think that's a really good space. There's also spaces in medical that are trying to make medical educational games, and I'm trying to think of what else that I just saw some article about this. But yeah, I mean that's a very good approach. Oh, I think the other one is advertising. I was just reading an article about McDonald's that is trying to advertise towards kids, and it's just a throw the ball in a Happy Meal box for the iPad. And it literally says, this is an advertisement, but it's made for kids to try to get their brand engagement and pass along a message.
Thank you. A question from Sheridan. He says, seeing as how many of our assets are HTML5, JS, etc., how do we protect any intellectual property in our HTML5 games?
Welcome to the open web. It's very hard to protect that stuff. You can obscure your code and uglify the code. At the end of the day, if someone really wants it bad enough, they're going to take it. But I mean, the reality and what I kind of tell people is that, for indies, the chances are pretty good that it's hard for someone to steal your code and then repurpose it. You would see usually they would just steal your whole game and try to repurpose that. Like I've actually seen that happen to one of my games before. So, not to make light of it, but I think, if you're looking to secure your game, especially if it's an HTML5 game, one of the best ways you can do it is going to be to run it on like a server. So you run the whole game on the back end of like Node.js or something, and then the front end is just this really dumb viewer, and you literally stream the game to players, but it's so much of an overhead that it may not be worth it. But I mean, just do the normal things, and then if you publish it to other platforms, such as as native wrappers or to Windows 8, it's a little bit hard to get at the source because you have to crack the file and pull it open.
Thank you. Ikaro is asking about your book, if there's any way to see, download, or play some of the games.
Well, the game for my book, I don't really have it online, but all my games are pretty much at jessefreeman.com. I have an older site which I need to either update or get rid of, which is gamecook.com, GAMCOOK.com, and there's a lot of my older games on there, and most of them are pretty much open source. But that's pretty much my jessefreeman.com/games is where you're going to find the best information, for my new games.
Super. And folks, I just pushed that out to you in the group chat, the URL, jessefreeman.com, and you can access the games and the workshops there as well. Okay, a couple more questions here. Sheridan says, Jesse, obviously this depends on the game, but how or what resources for us programmers who don't have lots of design for vector skills?
So if you don't have design skills? On my website, if you go to my website and you scroll down to the bottom on the left-hand side under the category column, you'll see that there's one called Game Art, and I actually open source all the game art from my games. So you can get art sets for Resident Raver, for Super Jetroid. I have one for an RPG, Tile Crusader. There's a lot of sets online that you can find that are open source. There's open source art websites. But the most important, is unfortunately, even I have an art background. I still wind up working with someone else to do my art because it's a huge bottleneck. And if you wind up doing everything yourself, you tend to not finish the game. So, if your budget allows, I highly suggest at least partnering up with someone because if you find open source artwork, it usually is missing the one critical thing you need, and that'll probably frustrate you enough not to continue. But in all honesty, I think you could treat artwork almost secondary, and if you just use squares and get the gameplay mechanic the right way, you may be able to work with someone who's very excited about working with you in the game and do some sort of revenue share, and they'll finish the artwork for you. So don't get hung up so much on the artwork. Really focus on the gameplay mechanic and make sure you have a very fun game.
Great. And we'll take this final question from Earl, who asks, Jesse, what is your most successful game financially?
I'm very unfinancially successful with my games. A lot of my games I do more for education to like open source and show. Up until this point, I've not treated it like a business, and I've done it more as a hobby, which is why I'm starting to spend a lot more time thinking through where ads go in my games. I have a slightly successful game on Android that I think has about 50,000 downloads now. It's a clone of Dope War called Cigar Smuggler. But even with ads, I barely make anything with it. I think the most successful games, ironically enough, I've had have been on the Nook, and I published a bunch of Flash games to it, and for some reason I was making decent money off of the Nook. But for the most part right now, I just have been building games just to kind of show off and just show people I can build it, and I'm hoping that towards the end of this, I'll start converting that into actually some sort of revenue generation.
Great. Thanks for your honesty on that, Jesse. All right. I'm not seeing any additional questions. So, folks, with that, we're going to make just a couple of announcements here. First of all, we want you to mark your calendars for June 20th because Jesse's going to do another webcast with O'Reilly, and we want to see you all there. We pushed out the red URL to you in the group chat. June 20th, he's going to talk about building HTML5 games for Windows 8. So that's going to be a fun one, too, and you don't want to miss it. Also, you heard Jesse is going to be speaking at O'Reilly's Fluent Conference. It's this month, May 28th through the 30th in San Francisco, California. We do have some tickets still left, and we can save you some money. Use code Webcast13. Again, that's also pushed out to you, so we'd love to see you at the conference if you can make it. Jesse's going to be there. He's going to be talking, doing some demos and teaching, so if you're available, please come by, introduce yourself, meet him, shake his hand. That would be really cool. And finally, I'd like to let you all know we can save you some money also with Jesse's book. If you like what you heard today, we did push out a code to save you some money on Jesse's book. Very good book there. Save you a lot of time and teach you a lot of things with developing games. So we do hope you take advantage of that code. Jesse, thank you again. And folks that attended, we thank you. This will conclude today's webcast. Goodbye, everybody.